Sorry, it's DJ.
Poverty is not a hindrance to success. Good day, everyone, especially to our dearest and loving instructor, Mama Ivy Diaz. Mom, good morning. Well, this is the presentation of Group 2. Annie Claire Lagura, Tani Luares, Oracion Marjolin, Kimberly Joy Melo, Rosel Otagan, and yours truly, Carmedas Grandes Polo. Well, our topic for today is all about poverty. Do you know what is poverty? Poverty in the Philippines has its origin in the Spanish colonial period. The social and economic development brought by the Spaniards were largely concentrated in the cities of strategic and economic importance, particularly the capital of Manila. The general strategy of colonization by the Spanish had been participation of Filipinos through conversion in Christianity and the establishment of local civil administration in dense settlements. This colonial administration ruled indirectly by empowering local chieftains, which created a class of Filipino political elites whose influence and prestige survive to the present. Such inflexible concentration power often produce societies whose political institutions are insufficient and little more than a vehicle of heredity. Power pass within the between prominent political clans. Economic development under this condition tends to be coordinated by corruption and is largely limited to families and urbanized regions close to the seat by the political, according to Bado 27. This political and social hierarchy flourished during the entirety of the Spanish period, and the distraction brought by about the Philippine Revolution and Philippine-American War was largely kept out from the secure city of Manila. This meant that the wealthy families of Manila and the other political clans largely kept the riches and prominence they had while under Spanish rule. They could also spare themselves from the generally mercy, feminine, and disease brought by our wars, thereby securing for themselves and their associates a lucrative future under the new American occupation.
The American colonial regime largely reinforced the same system as the Spaniards had throughout the rule. Historical tribal nobilities had been given colonial patronage by the Spanish administrations to rule through hereditary posts and acquisition of lands, which eventually enriched these families through export agriculture. Members of these families, the Principalia, were often educated in Europe and later took part in the First Philippine Republic. The introduction by the Americans of a legislative body composed of representatives from single-member districts created a ruling class of provincial land-owning politicians from the Principalia whose wealth and prominence allowed them to be highly educated and low, thereby being the only viable candidates for political office. Being landowners, they were naturally hostile to agrarian reform efforts, perpetuating the feudalistic inequality that existed in the Spanish colonial system. Infrastructure and economic developments were largely concentrated in Manila, but the destruction suffered by the city during the Second World War meant that the city had to be redeveloped from scratch. Poor urban planning and neglect for certain districts such as Tondo, meant that the population boom and emigration into Manila would undoubtedly result in numerous slum communities emerging throughout the city. Furthermore, the centralization of political power in Malacanang during the Marcos regime concentrated political and economic influence in Manila away from the political clans of the provinces. This created a double division between the urban rich and the poor. The wealthy owned the most valuable real estate within Manila away from the slums, and Manila itself became the center of business and foreign investment in the country, draining away potential capital for the development of rural provinces.
With the coming of the 21st century, the combined effect of tourism, OFW remittances, and foreign investment has done a large part in the reduction of the worst forms of poverty in the country and the growth of an educated Filipino middle class. But the perennial problems of poor urban development and rural deprivation persist, and the root causes are much the same as 2 centuries ago. Purely developed political institutions that allow for a culture of dominance by an elite of political dynasties. Economic growth has gone through boom and bust cycles, and recent episodes of moderate economic expansion have had limited impact on the poor. Great inequality across income buckets, regions, and sectors, as well as unmanaged population growth, and consider some of the key factors constraining poverty reduction efforts. Cause of poverty. The main causes of poverty in the country included the following: low to moderate economic growth for the past 40 years, low growth elasticity of poverty reduction, weakness in employment generation and the quality of jobs generated, failure to follow develop the agriculture sector, high inflation during crisis periods, high levels of population growth, high and persistent level of inequality, incomes and assets, which damp in the positive impacts of economic expansion, and recurrent shocks and exposure to risks such as economic crisis, conflicts, natural disasters, and environmental poverty.
There are some 7 solutions to poverty that are key to making this goal a reality. Here are the top 7. Number 1. Equality and representation for all. One of the main causes of extreme poverty is marginalization, the systemic barriers that lead the groups of people going without representation in their communities. Number 2. Building resilience, climate, and otherwise. Poverty is most likely to occur when there is a high amount of marginalization and risk, with the risk referring to a person or group susceptibility and the hazard they confront since declaring independence from France in 1960.
Number 3, but especially focusing on climate change. Resilience against climate change is especially important and deserves its own mention. According to the World Bank, climate change could force an additional 100 million people into extreme poverty over the next decade without any urgent action taken. From Cyclone Idai to droughts in the Sahel to floods in Bangladesh, we can prevent many of the current disasters afflicting the world. But we can't help the communities most vulnerable to this crisis because better prepared in order to protect their farms, their homes, their loved ones, and their livelihoods. Eco-friendly farming techniques such as climate-smart agriculture preserve vital topsoil, allowing land to recover from degradation and better adapt to extreme weather. Number 4. Increase access to education. According to UNESCO, if all students in low-income countries had just basic reading skills or nothing else, as estimated 171 million people could escape extreme poverty. If all adults completed secondary education, we could cut the global poverty rate by more than half. Education develops skills and abilities, corrects some of the imbalances that come out of marginalization, and decreases both risk and vulnerability. Number 5. Improve food security and access to clean water. Simply eating the 3 meals a day and getting a healthy amount of calories and nutrients can go a long way to addressing the cycle of poverty. When a person doesn't have enough to eat, they lack the strength and energy needed to work. Contaminated water can lead to debilitating illnesses. What's more, improving access to clean water can mean that those who live in rural communities, often women and girls, see our first point in our marginalization and equality. Well, save time walking to the nearest water point. Current estimates suggest that women and girls collectively spend 200 million hours every day walking long distance to fetch water.
And war and conflict. No war means that budgets allocated to cover the cost of conflict can be used to deliver public services. It also reduces risk faced by the most vulnerable communities and ensures that goals towards equality and inclusion can be maintained. We've seen this play out time and again. While estimates around data for country vary, Syria's poverty rate has increased from approximately 12% in 2007 to 83% in 2019. Conversely, in Nepal, a decade-long civil war came to a close in 2006, which correlates with a sharp increase in gross national income or GNI and gross domestic product or GDP year over year. Embrace cash and microfinance. One of the ways Cambodia's transition from wartime to peace, including the repatriation of over 300,000 Cambodian refugees, was so smooth was thanks to the idea of buying on credit. While such an influx of returnees could place a strain on resources and create financial dire straits, microfinancing models introduced into the country helped to establish savings, loans, insurance, and cash transfer services in communities that need them the most, allowing people to purchase the tools and services they need in order to become self-sufficient. Between 1998 and 2018, Cambodia's economy grew by an average of 8% each year, and its middle class began to flourish. Cash seems like an even more obvious solution to poverty. While the traditional image of humanitarian aid may be crates of supplies like food, water, and tents, distributing cash has become more common. It's cheaper and faster to get into a country, gives its recipients the autonomy to make their own purchasing decisions, and supports local and national economies.